My mother stood up in that courtroom, jabbed her finger at me across the aisle, and announced to everyone within earshot that I had completely lost my grip on reality. She said I needed to be committed. She said I'd been telling people I was rich, that I owned property all over Connecticut, that I had a private banker on speed dial. She told the judge I was a danger to my own daughter because I lived in a fantasy world. I didn't say a word. I just sat there with my hands folded in my lap, looking at the polished wood grain of the defendant's table, counting the seconds until my mother finished digging her own grave. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name doesn't matter much for what I'm about to tell you. What matters is that I was 31 years old, divorced 2 years, and the mother of a girl named Posey who had just turned 6 in September. Posey with the gap between her front teeth, who could not pronounce the word spaghetti no matter how many times I corrected her, who slept with a stuffed seal named Mr. Bubble that had been washed so many times, his fur had gone the color of old dishwater. I work in a field most people don't understand and don't really want to. The official title on my business cards reads Senior Director of Distressed Asset Recovery. What that actually means is that when a big company starts to die, when the accountants find the rot in the books, when the cash flow dries up, when the founders start moving money into places it shouldn't be, I'm the one who gets called in. I unwind it. I trace where the dollars went. I sit across tables from men in expensive suits and explain to them, very calmly, exactly how much trouble they are in, and exactly how much of their personal wealth I am about to redirect to the people they stole from. I am very good at what I do, quietly, almost invisibly good. The kind of good where my name appears in maybe 3 Wall Street Journal articles a year, always buried in paragraph 17, never on the front page. My condo in the South End of Boston was paid for in cash 4 years ago. My car is a 10-year-old Volvo because I genuinely don't care about cars. I wear the same 3 pairs of black slacks to work and rotate 4 blouses. If you saw me at the grocery store, you would think I was a tired nurse or maybe a junior accountant at a regional firm. This is on purpose. I learned a long time ago that the moment people know you have money, you stop being a person to them. You become a resource. You become a problem to be solved. My family didn't know. Not the real version, anyway. To my parents. I'll call them my mother and my father, because frankly they don't deserve the dignity of being named. I was the disappointment. The one who got pregnant at 24 by a man named Brogan, who left when Posey was 8 months old. The one who chose, in their words, to play at single motherhood instead of finding a real husband. The one who lived in some shoebox in Boston and worked some job they couldn't be bothered to ask about. To my younger sister. I'll call her my sister. The same logic applies. I was an embarrassment she introduced to her friends only when she absolutely had to. My sister had married well, as my mother liked to put it. Her husband, who I'll call my brother-in-law, ran a tech startup in Stamford. I had quietly looked into him about a year into their marriage, the way I look into everyone who enters my orbit, and what I found was not a tech startup. What I found was a holding company shell stacked on top of 3 other shell companies, which were stacked on top of what appeared to be a payments processor that didn't actually process very many payments. I had filed that information away in my head and said nothing. The pattern in my family was simple. My sister was the golden one. I was the cautionary tale. My father, a retired regional sales manager who had never in his life made more than $100,000 a year, treated my brother-in-law like visiting royalty. My mother had taken to wearing pearls to family dinners because she said the new level of the family demanded it. I tolerated all of it, for Posey. I want to be clear about that part. I tolerated my mother's little digs about my weight, my father's pointed silences when I talked about work, my sister's habit of giving Posey Christmas gifts that were obviously regifted from her own closet. I tolerated all of it because Posey adored her grandparents. She did not understand yet. She thought Grandpa's gruffness was just how grandpas were. She thought Grandma's sighs about her clothes were love. I was waiting. I knew the day was coming when Posey would understand on her own, and on that day I would not have to be the one who told her. Until then, I kept the peace. I drove the 2 hours from Boston to my parents' house in West Hartford twice a month. I sat through dinners where my brother-in-law explained crypto to my father. I smiled when my sister told me I should really get my eyebrows done. Then came Posey's 6th birthday. I'd been planning it for 2 months, not a big party. Posey is shy and gets overwhelmed by crowds, just family. My parents, my sister, my brother-in-law, 2 of Posey's little friends from her kindergarten class with their mothers, and me. I rented out the back room of a small Italian place in West Hartford because I wanted to do it close to my parents so they couldn't claim driving was too hard. I ordered a cake shaped like a mermaid, which had been Posey's obsession for the last 6 months. I bought her a little necklace with a pearl on it, real, small, but real, because that was what she'd asked for. Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock. I had told everyone 2 o'clock for months. I got there at 1:30 to set up. I taped little paper streamers along the back of Posey's chair. Posey's friends arrived at 2 on the dot with their mothers, who I knew a little from school pickup. I had cookies for them while we waited. The kids ran around the back room and Posey kept looking toward the door. At 2:15, my mother had not arrived. I texted her. No response. I told myself the traffic on Route 84 must be bad. At 2:30, Posey asked me where Grandma was. I told her Grandma was on her way. I went out to the parking lot and called my mother. Straight to voicemail. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. I called my sister and she did not pick up either. At 2:45, the cake came out and Posey's friends sang her happy birthday. And Posey blew out her candles and the entire time her eyes kept going to the door behind me. The other mothers were polite about it, but I could see them looking at each other. At 3, I tried my sister again and she finally picked up. There was music in the background. Loud music. The kind of music you hear at a party. "Where are you?" I said. "Oh God," she said. "Is that today?" I just listened. I let the silence sit there. "Listen," she said finally. "Brogan. Sorry, my husband. He flew everyone down to a place he just bought in Greenwich. The whole family. It's a surprise. He's giving me a new car. Can you believe it? Mom and Dad are here. I thought you knew. Did Mom not tell you?" I said nothing. "It's just," she went on. "You know, it's a whole thing. He hired a chef. There's a string quartet. Don't be weird about it. We'll celebrate Posey next time. Bring her over next weekend, okay? I'll get her something nice." I hung up. I went back inside. Posey was eating cake. The other mothers had quietly understood and were doing the heavy lifting on the conversation. One of them, a woman named Jenny, who I'd never said more than 10 words to before that day, came over and squeezed my arm and said, "She had a wonderful time. Look at her face." Posey was laughing at something one of the other girls had said. Cake was smeared at the corner of her mouth. Mr. Wright, Bubble was sitting on the chair next to her because Posey insisted he came to every meal. I went into the restaurant's bathroom and sat in the stall and did not cry. I am not a crier. I have not been a crier since I was about 19. What I did was something colder than crying. I sat there and I made a list in my head, the way I make lists at work when a fraud case lands on my desk. I listed every favor I had done for my parents in the last 5 years. The money I had quietly slipped my father when his car needed a new transmission. The Christmas I had paid for because my mother said money was tight. The vacation to Maine I had funded because my sister said she needed a break. All of it I had done anonymously, through gift cards, through bonuses from work, because I did not want them to know how much I made. Because I wanted them to love me, not the bank account. I had a different list, too. The list of things my brother-in-law's shell company structure suggested to a person who knew how to read it. The list of inconsistencies in the money flows. The list of names attached to the holding entities that did not match any actual human being any reasonable investigator could find. I had been sitting on that list for almost 3 years. I came out of the bathroom and finished my daughter's birthday party. I drove her home to Boston. I read her 3 chapters of the storybook we were working through and I kissed her forehead and I sat in my own bed and I opened my laptop. The next morning, Sunday, I sent my mother one thing, a greeting card. Blank inside. The envelope had a 1-cent stamp on it, deliberately under postage so it would arrive with a postage due sticker on the front. Inside the card was a single, crisp $1 bill and a post-it that said, in my handwriting, the following words: "For the party I missed. Use it wisely." That was Sunday. By Monday morning, I had a meeting with two colleagues at my firm, a forensic specialist named Sutter and an attorney we work with on civil recovery cases named Plenkoff. I will not pretend I told them everything in that meeting. I just told them I wanted to open a file. Quiet. No publicity. Personal interest billed to my own retainer. I gave Sutter the names, the shell companies, the dates, the places I'd seen the money flow funny 3 years ago. I told him to take his time. Don't rush. Don't tip anyone off. Just trace it. 2.5 weeks later, my mother called me. The first thing she said was, "How dare you?" I let her go. She got the dollar bill story out in a long, furious rush. How small I was. How petty. How she'd had to pay 48 cents in postage due to receive it. How embarrassing it was at the post office. How my father had nearly had a stroke when he saw it. How my sister was so hurt that I would do something so cruel. When she stopped to breathe, I said, very quietly, "You missed her birthday." She made a sound like she was being strangled. Then she said the line I will remember for the rest of my life. She said, "You expect us to choose your charity case life over a real family event?" Charity case life. I said nothing. I let the silence hang on the line for what felt like an eternity. Then I said, "Okay, Mom," and I hung up. The next week, my ex-husband called me. Brogan, who had not been a real father to Posey in 5 years, who paid child support only when his own mother nagged him about it, who lived 3 states away with a girlfriend whose name I could never remember. He called me out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in a meeting. I called him back at lunch. The conversation was short. He said he'd been talking to my mother. He said he was concerned about Posey. He said he'd heard I was, quote, unstable and telling lies about being wealthy. He said maybe it was time for him to take a more active role. I asked him very politely what exactly that meant. He said, "I'm filing for primary custody." I asked him who his lawyer was. He hesitated, and then he gave me a name I knew. A name attached to one of those law firms that runs late-night television commercials in Connecticut. The kind of firm that takes cases on contingency and writes intimidating letters on heavy letterhead. A firm, I knew from my own work, that my brother-in-law had used twice in the past 4 years to incorporate 2 of those very same shell companies I'd been quietly looking into. The web tightened. I told Brogan I understood. I told him I would see him in court. I hung up the phone, finished my salad, and went back to my meeting. That night I called Plenkoff from my home office. I told him I needed everything Sutter had so far. Plenkoff hesitated and said, "It's not all of it. We're still about 3 weeks out from a complete picture." I said, "Give me what you have." He did. And what he had was already more than enough. 3 weeks later, I was served. My ex-husband, backed by what he didn't know was effectively my brother-in-law's money, was seeking a change in primary custody. The petition cited concerns about the mother's mental health and grip on financial reality. It alleged that I had been making false claims about being a high-net-worth individual to manipulate the child. It alleged that my apartment was inadequate. It alleged, and this was the line that almost made me laugh out loud at the kitchen table, that I was emotionally unstable based on, quote, sending threatening communications to elderly family members. The dollar bill. They were putting the dollar bill in the petition. I called my attorney, not Plenkoff, a family law attorney named Margolin. No, that was actually my old colleague's wife, never mind. A family law attorney whose name I'll keep to myself, the best one in eastern Massachusetts. I told her everything. I told her about the dollar bill. I told her about the party. I told her about the file Sutter was building, and I told her exactly what I wanted to do, and I asked her if she could keep it sealed and clean until the right moment. She said, "Honey, this is going to be the easiest courtroom afternoon of my career." The hearing was set for a Thursday in early November. Posey stayed with her best friend's family that morning. I wore a black suit, no jewelry, my hair pulled back. I looked like a tax accountant. I looked like the woman my mother had been describing to anyone who would listen. My mother and father were in the gallery. So was my sister. My brother-in-law had not come, which interested me a great deal, but did not surprise me. Brogan was at the petitioner's table looking sweaty. My mother stood up at the wrong moment, just as the bailiff was calling the case to order, and she pointed at me. I have already told you what she said. That I was delusional, that I needed to be committed, that I was telling people I was rich, that I owned property all over Connecticut. The judge, a woman with iron gray hair and the kind of face that has seen everything, looked at my mother for a long second, then looked at Brogan's attorney and said, "Counselor, please instruct the gallery." Brogan's attorney shuffled my mother back into her seat. I sat. My attorney sat. The judge cleared her throat. For the first 40 minutes it was procedural. My ex-husband's attorney went first. He laid out the case. He made me sound like I was one bad day away from a psychiatric hold. He produced a copy of the dollar bill greeting card and presented it as evidence of erratic behavior. He told the judge that my mother, who he kept calling, with great emphasis, the petitioner's loving maternal grandmother, had grave concerns about my fitness as a parent. He told the judge I'd been telling family members I was a wealthy executive, when in fact, he said, public records showed I was a mid-level employee at a Boston firm with a modest condo. He sat down looking pleased with himself. My attorney stood up. She did not say much at first. She walked over to the bailiff and handed up a bound document. It was about 1.5 inches thick. She handed a second copy to opposing counsel. She gave a third copy to the judge. She said, "Your Honor, before we proceed to the question of the mother's parenting capacity, I'd like to address the question of her financial situation, since the petitioner has raised it as central to his concerns." The judge said, "Go on." My attorney began to read. She read out the address of my condo and noted that it was held outright, debt-free, in my name. She read out the value of my retirement accounts. She read out, in dry, careful language, my actual job title and the actual nature of my work, and she explained that confidentiality agreements with the firms my company has worked with prevented public disclosure of most of my matters, which was why my name did not appear in glossy magazines. She read out, in numbers that were quite precise, the actual amount in my primary brokerage account. I watched my mother's face the entire time. I watched the color drain from it the way water drains from a sink. My attorney was not finished. She turned then to the question of who exactly was paying for the petitioner's lawyer. She walked the court through the financial relationship between the petitioner's law firm and a company called Halcyon Bridge Holdings, which she explained was a Delaware-registered shell whose sole listed officer was my brother-in-law. She submitted into evidence wire transfer records, billing records, and a sworn affidavit from a forensic specialist named Sutter outlining a pattern of payments that, she said carefully, raises questions a federal regulator would find interesting. Brogan's attorney stood up halfway through this and said, "Your Honor, this is wildly outside the scope of..." The judge raised a hand. She did not even look at him. She said, "Counselor, I would like to hear the rest of this." "You may sit." He sat. My attorney finished. She set the binder down on the table and said, "Your Honor, my client has not been telling anyone in her family that she is wealthy. My client has, in fact, spent years not telling them. It appears the petitioner's case rests on the assumption that her actual financial situation does not exist. That assumption is false. Furthermore, the petitioner appears to have been induced to file this petition by a family member whose own financial interests may be substantially compromised by my client's professional knowledge." She sat down. The judge took off her reading glasses. She looked at Brogan. She looked at his attorney. She looked at my mother. Then she said the line that I will, until the day I die, replay in my head. She said, "Counselor, do you have any idea who your client's ex-wife is?" Brogan's attorney opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. The judge said, "Because I do. I sat on a creditor recovery proceeding 3 years ago where her firm was on the other side. I would advise you, before you file another paper in this matter, to do the kind of homework you should have done before you walked into my courtroom this morning." The room was so quiet I could hear the radiator clanging. My mother made a small sound. It was not quite a word. It was the sound a balloon makes when you let the air out slowly. The judge denied the petition. She did more than deny it. She referred the matter to the state bar for review of opposing counsel's conduct. She ordered Brogan to pay my legal fees, and then, with a glance at my mother and father and sister sitting in the gallery, she said one more thing for the record. She said that the court had concerns about third-party interference in a custody matter, and that further proceedings might be warranted. I walked out of that courtroom. My mother was crying. My father was staring at his shoes. My sister was on her phone, frantically typing, probably trying to reach her husband, who was, as I would learn within the next 48 hours, in the process of being raided by the Department of Justice. The file Sutter had been building had not been only for me. I had not asked him to send it anywhere, but I had not asked him not to. And Sutter, who is a deeply ethical man, had been doing the right thing for months without telling me. Because what he had found was not a small matter. It was tens of millions of dollars routed through fake vendors. It was investor money taken in for a tech platform that never existed. It was, as the indictment would later put it, a sustained pattern of securities and wire fraud. My brother-in-law was arrested on a Friday morning. My sister was at the salon when it happened. She called my mother first. Then my mother called me, and for the first time in my life, I let my mother's call go to voicemail. The voicemail was long. My mother cried for the first 30 seconds. Then, she begged for the next minute. Then she demanded in the last 30 seconds that I do something, pull strings, use my connections, make this go away. I did not return the call. The next week my sister came to my condo, unannounced. I almost did not buzz her up. She had been crying for what looked like several days. Her hair was unwashed. She told me everything was gone. The Greenwich house had been seized. Their accounts were frozen. She was being asked questions about whether she had known. She told me she had not known. And I believed her actually. I believed her in the way you believe a child who tells you they didn't notice the room was on fire. Credible, but damning. She asked me for money. $12,000, she said. Just to get through the next month. Just for groceries and gas while everything got sorted out. I looked at her standing in my entryway, and I thought about my daughter's 6th birthday. I thought about Posey looking at the door of that Italian restaurant. I thought about Mr. Bubble sitting on the chair next to her with cake smeared on his face. I thought about Jenny squeezing my arm. I thought about the Ferrari, the string quartet, the chef. I said, I sent you $1 already. She stared at me. I said, use it wisely. I closed the door. My parents have not spoken to me in 7 months. I hear through cousins that they have moved into a small rental in West Hartford because the house had a second mortgage on it that I had not known about. The cousins say my mother tells anyone who will listen that I abandoned the family. I do not respond. I do not correct the story. I am not the one who has to live inside it. My sister and I exchange short emails about once a month, mostly logistical. She is staying with a friend in New Haven. She has a job at a flower shop. She has not asked for money again. The last email she sent me ended with the words, I understand now. I won't bother you. I hope Posey is well. I have not yet responded. I will. Eventually. Brogan signed away his parental rights in exchange for the legal fees being dropped. His attorney was suspended. Posey did not even notice. She had not really known him. Posey is 7 now. She got a small dog for Christmas, a rescue mutt she named Doodle. She still sleeps with Mr. Bubble. We moved this past summer, not because we needed to, but because the condo had started to feel small with the dog and a growing girl. And we found a townhouse with a little yard in the same neighborhood and a school bus stop right outside the door. Jenny lives 2 streets over. Her daughter, Posey's friend from the birthday party, has become Posey's best friend. We have brunch with Jenny and her husband almost every Sunday now. I went into Posey's room a few weeks ago to put away laundry. She was at the kitchen table with her workbook. On her dresser, where she keeps her treasures, the smooth rocks from the beach, the half-used tube of cherry lip balm, the friendship bracelet her best friend made, there was the dollar bill. I had not realized she had it. She must have found it in my desk drawer at some point. I had kept the original. I put it in an envelope and labeled it the way you label evidence in a case file, with the date. I asked her about it that night at dinner. I said, Posey, did you take $1 from Mommy's desk? She looked up at me. Cake from a school cupcake on her chin. Mr. Crudy. Bubble in her lap as always. She said, yes. I said, why? She thought about it for a long second. She had become a thoughtful child over that year, in ways I had not expected and was not always ready for. She said, because you said it was for the party. And the party was mine. So the dollar is mine. I almost cried. I did not because I am not a crier, but I almost did. I told her she was right. I told her she could keep it. I told her it was hers. She nodded, very seriously. Then she asked me to pass the rolls. That was a year ago. The dollar is still on her dresser. She has not spent it. I do not think she ever will. I learned a lot from all of this. Not the lessons people expect when I tell them shortened versions of the story. People expect me to say I learned about forgiveness, or about cutting off toxic family, or about the importance of being authentic. Those are not the things I learned. What I learned is this. The people who love you do not require you to prove yourself. The people who love you do not show up at your door when their world collapses asking what you can do for them. The people who love you do not skip your child's birthday for a Ferrari. And the people who love you, when you finally show them who you really are, do not flinch. My daughter did not flinch. She just kept eating her birthday cake at a table full of people who showed up. That, in the end, was the only verdict that mattered. I've thought a lot, in the months since that courtroom, about why it all unfolded the way it did. People want me to say it was luck or that the universe rewarded me. I don't believe that. What I believe is much simpler and much harder. Every single thing that happened to my family was something they built themselves, brick by brick, choice by choice, over a span of years I didn't even realize I was watching. When my mother decided that my sister's marriage was a status symbol worth bowing to, she didn't notice that she was teaching her own husband to ignore his other daughter. When my father stayed silent every time my mother dismissed me, he didn't notice that silence is also a vote. When my sister accepted a Ferrari from a man whose money she didn't ask questions about, she didn't notice she was tying her future to a sinking ship. They were not punished by some outside hand. They reaped exactly what they had spent 2 decades planting. That's the part nobody wants to hear, because it means we are all already writing the ending of our own stories right now, in the small decisions we make this week. This Tuesday afternoon. I think a lot about Posey too, about what she will take from this when she's old enough to understand it. I don't want her to learn cruelty. I don't want her to learn that revenge is a way to live. What I want her to learn is something quieter and sturdier. I want her to learn that good character is not weakness, that the woman who keeps her dignity when she is humiliated is not losing. She is keeping the only thing nobody can take from her. I want her to learn that wisdom is not the same as cleverness. Cleverness is what my brother-in-law had, stacking shell companies, thinking nobody was watching. Wisdom is knowing that someone is always watching and that the person you should answer to first is the one in the mirror. And I want her to learn endurance. The kind that does not announce itself. The kind that drives 2 hours to West Hartford twice a month for years, smiling through dinners that hurt. Because you decided to give the people who hurt you the chance to choose better, even when they kept choosing worse. The endurance that lets you sit in a bathroom stall at your daughter's birthday and not cry because there is still a cake to cut and a little girl looking at the door. I sent $1 in an envelope. That dollar didn't destroy anyone, it only delivered the bill that was already overdue. The lesson I keep coming back to is this. The life you owe yourself is built in the years nobody is clapping for you. Keep building it anyway. The day the truth walks in, you'll be ready.